So may I start then?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good night, everyone, depending on where you are. We are here today for yet one more of the WCAA WAU webinars, which are now a joint venture of WCAA and IUAES. So these webinars started in April 2020, right in the beginning of the pandemic. And they have been WCAA organized webinars, but within the scope of WAU, which is the World Anthropological Union. And as you all know, WAU includes both WCAA, the World Council of Anthropological Association, and IUAES, the International Union of Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences. So starting January 2023, this is the first webinar officially co-organized as a joint venture of WCAA and IUAES. So the first person I want to thank is our colleague Subhatra Shana, who is our colleague in IUAES and has been organizing this webinar with me. Actually, she was the one who proposed this topic, which I think is very important in the present day situation with all that is going on in Iran, but unfortunately not only, but of course, Iran is the hotspot for this big problems, as you all know, and that's also the reason why we are all here today. As you know, the webinar is being recorded. It will be available online on the WAU website. And I also want to thank Michel Bouchat, our colleague from the University of British Columbia, who hosts, technologically does the IT part. And also I want to thank Luisa Giordani, who is a student from Brazil who did the poster. And of course, having said all this, I want to thank all the participants that are here today. And I will go on, proceed on with presentation of each one of them. This wasn't a webinar easy to organize, as actually many of them aren't, because it's normal. Everybody has her or his commitments, and it's always difficult to find a date that suits everyone in an hour. Normally, these webinars take place at 2 p.m. And so we finally have these 4 wonderful people who agreed to participate, and I welcome you all. So we have Nasim Basiri. Nasim Basiri is an Iranian transnational feminist researcher, a poet and academic activist. She's the co-founder of the Commission of Transnational Feminines and Queer Politics at IUAES. She's also currently pursuing a doctoral degree in women, gender, and sexuality studies at Oregon State University. And she has a major role in current transnational feminist and queer movements and all the history of gender violence in post-revolutionary Iran. Then we have Nadia Aghatie. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. She's a senior lecturer in gender and violence at University of Bristol. She's also an active member of the Center for Gender Violence and has conducted research concerning gender-based violence within national and international contexts. And her research focuses on cultural, spiritual, and structural violence amongst women and young people. Then Ruxana Zaman, she's an assistant professor at the Indira Gandhi National Open University at Delhi, India. She was a member of the Academic Council, IGNU, the School Board of Social Sciences, and the convener of the IGNU Researchers Forum. Her research interests are ethnicity, identity, ethnic conflict, anthropology of performance, mainly dance, visual anthropology, gender studies, and social institutions. Last but not least, our invited gentleman, Christian Bromberger. He's an emeritus professor of anthropology at the University of Aix-Marseille, where he founded and directed the Institute of Mediterranean and Comparative Ethnology, which is called in French IDEMEC. He was a senior member of the Institut Universitaire de France, the French University Institute, from 1995 to 2005. And from 2006 to 2008, he directed the French Institute for Research in Iran, in Tehran. He has done a lot of field work in Iran, and this is also the reason why we decided to invite him. So having said all this, I welcome you all once again. Christian, vous êtes là, c'est bien. Bonjour, vous m'écoutez?
Bonjour, mais
Christian, bonjour.
est-ce que vous m'entendez?
J'ai essayé de vous appeler parce que j'avais peur, je ne savais pas ce qui se passait. Bon, vous êtes là. Très bien. Merci beaucoup.
Je suis là,
Thank
mais
you.
vous m'entendez?
Oui, oui, on vous entend. Can you all hear him?
Yes, okay.
Yes, it's fine, no
Fine.
problem. Yeah, don't worry, technological events like this one that go through technology always have a little problems, but we hear you very well. On vous entend très, très bien, sans problème, Christian. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, so having said this, we will now start. Normally, I start from east to west. We are actually all here, so I might just start with Ruxana since she made it on time. And I just want to explain the topic of this webinar is Middle Eastern women. As I said, it was an idea of our colleague Subhadra, and I think it's a very important topic. There has been, as you know, and yesterday was publicized also one of the webinars that Nadia was in, and it has been a recurrent theme in webinars and international forum due to the terrible and sad situation in Iran. So although we thought that this could be focused on Iranian women due to all the problems they are going through, we also thought it would be nice to have voices from elsewhere. And that's why Ruxana is here. And we hope that this very informal debate between us all women and all the men that want to come in, of course, it's not gender-based, it's open, of course, to everyone, although the focus is on women. We hope that we all have a very nice debate. And as you all know, also, everyone that is attending may then ask questions either through this chat or verbally. And we always ask people to introduce themselves, at least say where they're from, so you have an idea of the scope of this international webinar, either if they do it orally or on the chat, through the chat, okay? So thank you very much, and I will start with Ruxana.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Initially, I had requested to be the last speaker in this forum. In all honesty, I would like to state that I'm not a scholar who have done much work on the women in the Middle East. But however, I take this opportunity to talk about what is happening, and in particular women in general. And being a woman, I feel that the problem of women, atrocities on women, victimization of women is universal. And thus, even though I'm not from that part of the country, nor have I gone through all the issues that would be taken up here today, I would just like to focus on a few things. Like when we talk about the gender issues, it is, as I had stated, is universal across the world. There is even if you are not in Iran, but I'm sure every one of us who is here present today must have had gone through the issue of gender discrimination, the issue of victimization. We don't have to go to look at bigger issues. Like, for example, Eve teasing. I'm sure one or the other must have gone through this at one point of time or another. We overlook many a times Eve teasing because it is felt it has become such a normal part of everyday life. We do not even think about it until and unless there is a media representation that talks about a woman who has undergone acid attack, or who has been stabbed on the middle of the road, or who has been raped. So only then it becomes an issue that grows out of proportion. And in this regard, it is what I would like to propose today is not about discussing what is happening today, but how we can look at it through our debates and discussions and take it to a larger platform to have a better tomorrow. Because discussions and debates would continue. But what next? In this regard, even if we talk about the movement that is going on in the Middle East today, We are going to discuss about it with lot of passion, lot of compassion. But what about tomorrow? If the movement becomes a success, would we be able to say that we have achieved something? Would the woman be safe going back to her own homes? That is the question that we need to look into, trying to find a better tomorrow. And I feel that this is where the concentration should be when we are talking, when we are discussing, and when we are talking about the issues that is happening in the Middle East. Moreover, one more, I would like to draw the attention of this forum to one more issue, which is of gender equality, representation. Even now, as we are discussing, we have so many eminent anthropologists across the globe, but how many are present here, be it male or female? And until and unless there is an equal gender representation, we cannot move forward. That is what I personally believe. And in this regard, I would like to state an example. It was the IUAS conference of 13th, it was held in Manchester in 2013, and there was a panel on women. And in this panel, if I remember, Subhadra ma'am was the convener. And there were people like Faye Harrison, there were people like Ranjana Ray, there were people like some of the Indian names that I can recollect were Shalina Mehta. And in this entire forum on the discussion on women, there was just one male representation, and that was Professor S.M. Patnaik. At that point of time, I was young, I was naive, and I couldn't understand his presence in that forum, in that panel. But today, now 10 decades after it, I feel that that is what we need. We need to discuss, we need to talk about it. We need the other half of the population to be here, because they are the ones who are the ones who are a party to it. If atrocities are happening on women, who is committing them? Where are we pointing to? They are not here. And until and unless they are here, until and unless they understand the problem of their woman, be it their mother, be it their sister, be it their precious daughter, daughter-in-law, sister-in-law, we are not moving forward. So these are some of the questions and concerns that I wanted to raise here today. And I'm sure I will learn a lot about the issues that are there in the Middle East. So with this, I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rukhsana, for your intervention. We will now go on to the next speaker, Nadia Aghatie from the University of Bristol. Please, Nadia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Clara, for inviting me to be here today. It's an honor to be here and meet so many fantastic scholars. As you said, I think one of the focuses of today's discussion is about what is happening in Iran, but also the broader issues that Rukhsana referred to. As probably all of you know, first of all, before I start, I would like to say that what I'm saying today is really based on my observation from far in diaspora. So because what happened in Iran, the movement started so, it's so recent. No empirical research has actually been conducted in Iran. So what I say is about my observation from what's been happening, but also complemented by the work that I have done in relation to violence against women within the Iranian context and children's rights. So as we know, the uprising in Iran started sort of in September by the killing of Jina Amini, which is known also as Mahsa Amini, a young Kurdish woman who was killed while in the custody of the morality police. So it ignited a protest in Iran, which is quite different to anything that we've had in the past. In many aspects, I'm not saying everything, but in many aspects, it's quite different, this uprising. I think one of the most important things is that is the slogan itself. So the women, life, freedom. And it's a slogan that has been sort of shouted in the streets of Iran by young women, but also supported by their male counterparts. I think it's the first movement in the Iranian history. I don't want to overclaim it, but I am not aware of a revolution or a big movement like this that have been ignited by women. So I think that is one of its main characteristics. And men have been standing shoulder to shoulder with women and have been actually supporting them in this. But also a lot of the protests in the past in Iran have been ignited by political or economical reason. But this is, I think, is about social justice. It's about social justice, and therefore it has attracted people from sort of a diverse background. So it's very inclusive, it's very diverse. It's the first time that have brought people from diverse socioeconomic background, from diverse ethnic background, from diverse religious background within the Iranian context. But also not only within the Iranian, I think, sort of a context, but also it has attracted the support of people from across the globe. From across the globe, just everyday people, but also celebrities, politicians, and the Iranian diaspora. And the reason, I think, one of the main reasons is again about that is about social justice. And I think there have been many movements in the past 44 years since the succession of the Islamic Revolution, but I think this has shaken the core of the regime in a way that it has never done before. And one of the main reasons I believe is that because women have actually have been the focal point of the Islamic discourse since 44 years ago. And there has been a huge focus on the national identity of the Islamic government, but also women's body. And with women actually taking their scarves off and shouting "Women, Life, Freedom," it has really created something which is quite unbelievable. And for me, who lived in Iran during my teenage years, I've never seen anything like this before. And the bravery of women in Iran, but also the bravery of the parents. They have encouraged. I think it has encouraged the wider community, not only the Generation Z, who have been the main driving force of the revolution, but also the parents, the grandparents, to sort of support the movement. And I would say one more thing before I give the floor to somebody else is that as I said, the Generation Z has been one of the main drivers of the movement. They have used technology in a way that have not been used before. I think they have created a movement that has traveled across the globe. And in a way, I think the government feels quite, sort of paralyzed sometimes, I feel, because they think they can't actually control this. There are no boundaries, there are no walls there anymore. They cut the internet, they come up with something else. So in a way, in its nature and the way it's going forward, I think it has been absolutely unique and amazing. However, it has quietened down a little bit, but I am not disappointed. I don't feel that is stopped. I think because of public execution, so that has had an impact on the sort of slowing the movement, but also I think each movement has got its ups and downs, and people start to think of different strategies to go forward. And I think that is now going through the next stage where the Iranian nation in Iran are actually looking for other avenues to take the movement to another level.
Nadia, thank you very much for your words, your first intervention. We'll now move on to the next speaker, Nasim Basiri, an Iranian transnational feminist who is based at Oregon, right?
Yes.
So you have the
Hello.
floor. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Clara, for organizing this event. And I'm serious about what I'm saying because there are rare events on this feminist movement in Iran. I would like to thank Professor Subhadra Chana and also Faye Harrison for being with us since the beginning of these academic movements that we started for Iran in 2020 and 2021, which actually led to this cultural revolution because we brought artists, like prominent artists, former political prisoners of conscience, who then later on ended up becoming authors in exile, and professors in different fields of Iranian studies, especially the feminists. So the academic wave of this revolution started. I mean, it's of course a long struggle, but what actually made fueled the fire of this revolution in academia was an academic conference that was organized by the United Nations in Vienna in 2019. And that brought in Iranian intellectuals together from different perspectives, different political views, and that there we could have conversations. And those conversations actually led to a bigger movement, academic movement for Iran. So beside the feminist movements and civil society movements in Iran and in diaspora, academic movements played a very important role in shaping this revolution, but they didn't find ways to media, and of course, again, because of the fears of persecution and terror, which Islamic Republic has a long history of going after academics, even in diaspora. And IUAS has always supported Iranian anthropologists and social scientists who had to pay a very high price for their research or even simply raising awareness on violations of human rights in Iran. So thank you so much for that. What we yesterday, 2 days ago, we had another panel organized by our commission, and we brought some prominent Iranian scholars who teach and research in the United States. And they actually address some very important points regarding this revolution and the future of this revolution. So I think Nadia perfectly talked about the situation in Iran and how people got into the streets. Later on, we will, of course, spend time on the roots of this revolution and how it moved from the streets to academia and then back to the streets right now. But what I'm trying to say here, Clara, is that to be honest, when we compare the other movements, other transnational movements in other parts of the world, like for the developing countries, third world countries, we see that Iran has been removed from all these transnational movements, except a few scholars, maybe with fear, they go to international organizations and talk. So that's a very serious thing that I think both your organization and IUAS should spend more time on this and see that how they can help to organize more conferences, more panels, not just in the West, but also everywhere in the world, because your organizations have lots of members from hundreds of countries, and all the people who attend at the annual congresses and conferences are prominent scholars and very compassionate about human rights issues. So here in the United States, violations of human rights in Iran is a very sensitive issue that sometimes we have to hide ourselves. Sometimes we don't say we are from Iran because people get, like academics get scared of you. I mean, this has been my personal experience, and we had to pay a high price just to speak in a few panels. And but the destiny of so many of the Iranian scholars and activists who ended up in the United States was poverty, to be honest, and to face serious mental health issues, because the empires that the Islamic Republic has built around the world, especially in North Americas and the wider Western world, is huge. Like, it's like a drop the ocean. But the good thing about this movement right now is that it was so powerful, and because it came from like the cornerstone of Iranian society, scholars, activists from lower levels of Iranian society engaged in an act of resistance and a struggle on a surface level this time. I mean, it already happened. I mean, there were lots of killings, imprisonments, and all during this 44 years of the Islamic Republic ruling Iran, but they couldn't come into the surface. And there's a important reason behind it. I think it's not just the internal oppressions against Iran, against the civilians and the activists and the scholars in Iran, but also what Subhadra and Faye Harrison call it, a global apartheid, which is real. And especially I, as a person, come from a middle-class intellectual family. I've been following and observing this, my own journey from Iran to the United States, and like my education and activism really told me that we were buried in Iran. We were really buried. And those who could like get a visa and go talk about the sufferings and the injustices going in Iran, they later on got buried in the West even. So things in Iran is very different right now. And as Nadia also pointed out, it's a very inclusive movement, revolution now, because maybe 90% of Iranian population, even, let's, if you forget about the gender, 90% of, or maybe more than 90% of the citizens of Iran, they don't want this regime. It's a criminal regime. It's not just misogynistic or homophobic or transphobic. It's against humans and humanity. And we see that the empires has already influenced the entire world in a negative way. And then there was another very sad thing against Iranian activists and scholars in academia, was that they always related us to the colonial projects, like feeling the like fuel of the colonial projects, or Islamophobia, or Eurocentrism, or Orientalism, which I have a lot of respect for the Edward Said's theories, but in the case of Iran, it didn't work. To be honest, it led to a marginalization of Iranian women, their bodies and their futures. It's like, it was a harsh trauma that was imposed also by academia on Iranian women and LGBTQ plus people. So it was not only one thing, it was a total collective effort against Iran and Iranians. So what I really request right now is that, now that we have brought this movement to this point, which is a very important point, it is changing lives in the entire Middle East, because we know that if something happens, the feminist movements are very powerful in Iran, supernatural, and that it influences all the Middle Eastern feminists and movements, like what happened in Afghanistan. I think Nadia follows that. Like, it's a very exceptional and extraordinary phenomenon happening in Iran. It became global for the first time because of the COVID pandemic and isolation and internet. And then it gave like it turned into a huge revolutionary wave that changed the movements in Afghanistan. Afghan women were always marginalized, both in academia and also their activism, because the situation is much worse than Iran, was much worse than Iran. And then it got improved, and now the Taliban barbaric regime is back again. So it's a movement for all. And then I think things will change in the world for good if we pay more attention and take this movement serious in academia, because without academia, these revolutions do not, end to a proper result or to liberation for all, since we need intellectual support to direct and also to develop and guide this revolution. But one thing for sure is that this regime is collapsing, but what we can do as academics is very important to make it less violent and to make it like the process faster. So we need so much help, because academics in Iran, they cannot speak, or if they speak their own underground groups, nobody actually listens.
They may go to
them.
prison.
It just happens, and they go to prison, but it just happens among them. And we are being treated as spies. Definitely those who come. Yes.
Nasim, sorry for interrupting. It's just that I was going to, normally we have 5 minutes for each person, for each speaker. So what you're saying is very interesting, but I was going to move on to the next one, but then you'll have another slot where you can, go on expanding your ideas. But thank you very much. Thank you very much for the scenario you just gave us.
Yeah, we'll continue our discussion.
No, we continue. I'm just, we always do it like this. We do a first round and then a second round with the same participants, and then we open up the discussion, okay?
Sure.
Thank you very much. Nasim, I will now move on to our one and only male speaker, Christian Bromberger. Thank you very much. Christian, I give you the floor.
Thank you so much. I would like to know from Nasim, how can you say that 90% of the population is against the regime, the actual regime? Have you any statistics about that?
Christian, this is a very important question and it's very good for the debate, but I would now first ask you to do your part. And then after the second round, we will move on to all this type of questions and debate, okay?
Okay.
Otherwise, if we open the discussion straight away, we kind of get lost. So it's better to keep it this way.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would like to come back to two symbolic gestures by women during this protest movement. First gesture, to cut the hair. This gesture is both in Iran a gesture of mourning when a woman loses her husband. Thus, Farangis in Ferdowsi's Shahnameh cuts her hair when she learns of the death of her husband Siyavush. But cutting the hair can also be a gesture sanctioning the bad behavior. Gizbody Day with the cut ponytail stigmatizes the woman's bad life. Added to this is a revolt against the established order. Traditional women in Iran generally have long hair. Cutting your hair is both a gesture of solidarity for Mahsa Amini, killed by the morality police in September 2021, and a revolt against submission. The veil is a symbol of submission, but it is also a political symbol. Let us remember that in 1978, 1979, during the demonstrations that overthrew the imperial government, some women, although concerned about their rights, wore the veil to signify their opposition to the Shah's regime. These examples show us, if we had to remind it, that a symbol can have different meanings and that these meanings can even be contradictory. We know the factors of discrimination of women in Iran. So I shall not insist on that because it was aggravated by the Islamic regime, we know that. However, a series of facts attest to a positive evolution of the status of women, which undoubtedly explains the emergence of the current protest, which is not only urban and bourgeois. And it's very important, I think, to insist on this fact that the actual movement is not only urban and bourgeois. The female population is today largely literate and educated. From 1986 to 2016, the rate of literate women aged 15 to 49 rose from 48 to 92%. Their presence at university exceeds that of men in the 2000s, but in 2010 and 2011, a quota system was adopted to restrain the number of women able to enter university education. The age of at marriage has also changed. It increased from 19 years in 1976 to 24 years in 2016. The free union emerged in the big cities. The fertility rate has dropped considerably on the initiative of women since the revolutionary period. It was 7.2 children per woman in 1976, one of the highest rates in the world, remained stable from 1979 to 1985, then began a vertiginous fall to reach 1.9 children per woman in 2009. The use of contraceptives reached 74% in 2000. The development goes hand in hand with a strong urbanization. 47% of the population lives in cities in 1966, 76% in 2021, with the widespread use of internet, as Nasim told us recently, and with a climate of globalization that the Islamic government is trying to dissipate. Husbands now discuss major family decisions with their wives. So it's just some reflection from an anthropologist who is not a specialist in women's problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian, for adding this more quantitative context of what. No, but it's interesting because it gives us no, it's not. It gives us a background against which we can contextualize all these movements and all the issues that both Nadia and Nasim just so well explained us. Although we are all aware of what's been happening in Iran, and both IOAS and WCA have had important roles also in writing letters and trying to free, for instance, colleagues that have been in prison. And we know that is the case. And I think that Subhatra and we also know that, some people we contacted said they would love to participate, but it would make their life impossible. So we saw that very well that it, like Nasim said, you need a lot of courage to be an activist and to really give your face in this type of situation we are in now. So thank you very much to everyone. We will now go to the second round. So everyone has introduced the main issues at stake here. Of course, it's very wide to be able to do it in 1.5 hours, 2 hours, but still, I think we've had very good contributions that gave us the scenario. Now we'll move on to Roxana again, please.
Thank you so much, Clara. And taking cues from Nasim's work and what Kristen had to say, and also from Nadia's discussion, I would like to say that yes, this entire situation is a very sensitive issue, an issue which even academia is finding it difficult to come to context and contextualize it because of the quote unquote, the fear that everyone is going through. It is a movement which definitely needs all our support. However, there are certain things which Christian had brought to light, like the symbol that he had talked about cutting off hair, and which he even stated is contradictory when he said that it could be a sign of bad behavior or a revolt against submission. But what it resonates to is the question of it's her body and her right, whether to cut her hair or let it grow. And this cannot be contextualized in such a situation. Even as he had said that it was a revolt against submission. Yes, that can be true, but it cannot be stated as a sign of bad behavior. That cannot be that is actually I understand all of us are here and all of us are feminists and all of us are doing a lot of work on the body and her rights and everything. So for me personally, it is a right to choose whether to keep your hair long or to cut it short. And as Nasim had rightly stated, that it is a movement where a lot of contribution is needed from the academia. But the question still lies is, how can we contribute? How do we contribute? The webinars, the seminars, will it be enough to go to the root of the problem, to curtail and to come up with a solution? Is something that I would love to hear from the other participants, how the academia can contribute to this movement. And as Nadia has rightly pointed out, this movement had got so much of a global attention because of the technological know-how that we are going through today. Even our webinar today, it is all thanks to the technological movement, the digital world that we are living in. Otherwise, it would have been really impossible for all of us, people from India, US, and the UK, to come together at one platform. So yes, the technology has played a very important role. However, even that technology has been curtailed. There has been sanctions on using the internet, and in a way, it has been isolated. We honestly do not know exactly what is happening there. What we know is a little snippets that we get from here and there. So these are some of my observations from the discussions that Nadia and Nasim and Kristen has brought about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roxana. I think that there was a slight misunderstanding, because I don't think Christian was saying that women are not entitled to choose whether to cut or not cut their hair. What he was saying is that in this context of rebellion, women have used that, which was a traditionally gesture of somehow submission, you know, the grief for the husband or disobedience, they have done it on purpose to show that they are being disobedient and that they are against the regime. This is the way I read, or I
Yes,
understood what
yes.
Christian was saying.
Oh,
So it
Yes,
was not,
I agree with you.
He
Yeah.
used it as a symbolic.
yeah, as a symbolic. So perhaps he was misunderstood. So I just wanted to
Mm.
clarify it, because I think
Okay.
that's what Christian meant. The symbolic
Yeah.
meaning of this gesture of women as a sort of a metaphor for disobedience,
Yeah,
or
I
Yes,
think
yes,
what he was trying to
quite
do
agree with
was to translate the original cultural meaning as it
Yeah.
now has been translated into a protest.
yeah,
So
exactly.
it is a
Okay, but
translation from what it
right.
really meant earlier, because even in India, we have the same thing, that widows cut
Yes,
their
correct.
hair. But
Mhm.
today, women cut their hair because they want to. Earlier,
Yeah.
it was forced on them. Today, it is, you can have any hairstyle.
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll move
sorry.
on. I'm sure we'll come back to the symbolic meanings and lectures of and readings of gestures and of what people do. But so let's follow the order again. So I'll ask again Nadia to come in, please.
Yes, I just wanted to say something in relation to what Christian said. I think he rightly talked about education and how women's education has statistics has gone up. But I think it's sort of noteworthy to say that the Iranian state, when the revolution happened, they endorsed girls' education because the Islamization of the education system in Iran would hopefully sort of harvest generations of virtuous and devout women who can sort of convey the culture and the tradition that is promoted by the state to their children. Because they closed all the schools and they closed all the universities for 2 years, and they changed the entire curriculum. So they thought that if we increase the girls' education and we encourage them to go into schools and universities, it means that they are going to be the fantastic future mothers who will.
Well, I don't agree much with that, because you see, it's twofold. When you go to university, you meet some people and so forth. And so it's not only what is taught from above, but it's also all the knowledge you get from the others you meet in the university. And so you see, it's a very ambiguous thing, university and education.
I think I totally agree with you. I'm saying the reason the government encouraged the girls' education, because at that point, 44 years ago, there were, the globalization had not really happened to this extent. So they did not think that the generation who are going to go to university are going to resist these prescribed gender ideology that has been fed to them through schools. So we ended up with a young generation who are resisting those binary sort of a masculinity and femininity that have been promoted within the education system in Iran. I have done a sort of a mapping review recently of the textbooks in Iran. And the textbooks in Iran, from a very young age to when they get to high school, they promote a very strict gender ideology. And there is a sort of underneath it, there is a fear of women's sexuality. And I think they were hoping that by feeding, they didn't think that young people have got autonomy, they have got a sort of agency, and they are going to resist what they are being told, because we have got internet, they have got access to so much information out there. I think they sort of if probably this is what up to here what I have said is based on research, but what I'm going to say now is my conclusion of what has been happening. I think if the Iranian state knew that encouraging girls' education is going to bite them back, they wouldn't have done it.
No, I agree with you, but you see, it's a twofold way. And of course, there was some courses imposed by the regime, and it was very hard. but you see, you meet some other people in the university, at the university, and so it's your mind is open in this trend. Of course, there is a twofold system, you see, in the university, and this part of university is not dominated by the mullahs, you see.
Christian, sorry for interrupting, but it is better if we first give the floor to each of the persons, then we enter the debate. Otherwise,
Okay.
we won't have enough time for everybody to speak. So let's just respect the order, and then we'll go into the debate, because what you're saying and what Nadia is saying is, of course, an important topic for debate. But we'll move on to that. So, Nadia, are you done? May I pass the word to the floor
yes,
to
please.
Nasim? Okay,
Please do.
Nasim, please. Thank you.
Okay, so first I wanted to give an answer to Christian. Yes, it is 99% and maybe 100%, I don't know, maybe 1% of these conservatives want to stay. And according to the official statistics published even by the English media, 88% of Iranians inside Iran, they don't want this regime anymore, and 99% abroad. And we see that these white protests around the world, in Canada, in London, and just 2 days ago, February 11th, in Los Angeles, thousands of 50,000, 100,000. It's a very big number. A big number. It's like the first time happening in the whole history of humanity, Christian. And to be honest, Iranian women are highly educated, and not just official education, but also they got the wisdom. And it's because of the rich history that they had, and this mentorship, the idea of mentorship literature. So they have wisdom, and they also are very much educated, 60%. That means that's a very that's a strange statistics for a country that is known and is called out for being one of the most oppressive regimes towards women. But then I think I agree with Rukhsana that, yes, we can just talk about all this stuff and theories and how is it going there in Iran. We know that as an Iranian researcher and activist who've been observing the entire movement, both in academia and civil society movement, I can tell you that it's like a apocalypse there in Iran. They come get people, students, even high school students, even the university students, they're all in jail. They go to music institutes, people get disappeared. And they don't even tolerate their own relatives, their own children. So another important, interesting thing about the situation in Iran right now is that even the children of these conservative clergies, and also those who are against actually justice and against humanity, are against them. So it's a real revolution. It's a real revolution, and Islamic Republic is kind of breathing. This is their last breaths. So what we need is really help and support from academia, especially global organizations that are connected to the important universities in the world. We write to the university. I think one of the ways to spread the news and make academics and students engage with the Iranian Revolution, which is very important, is to write letters to the presidents of the universities and organizations to at least, organize small workshops, panels at their universities. And then within a few months, we see that the Iranian movements, feminist movements, will be embedded next to the other transnational movement and in the collective imagination and memory of the world, which is very important. We don't see American media broadcast or publish news on Iran a lot. And at the universities in the United States, to be honest, they don't organize events for Iran right now, which is very important. I mean, whatever happens in the US influences the world directly. But in Canada, it's different. In the Western Europe, it is different. So we really need that. I think even the United States should start taking this revolution very serious, because it will be beneficial for their own, for their politics, for their safety, for everything. We all want to get rid of this criminal regime that has no respect.
No, I agree with you, but you see, 90%, where did you find these statistics? Where
The
did you find
statistics is published by the.
I hope so that you are right. You see.
Yeah. Be sure that I don't talk on my, myself or my own behalf of myself. You can just search. I think Al Arabiya, CNN, and like so many international news agencies have published statistics, and these are not something that they wrote. It's based on the information and the interviews they got with sociologists both inside the country and in Iran. And another interesting thing is that even academics in Iran, they're not scared of the regime anymore. We see that there are so many panels happening in Iran, but it's in Persian language. It's not in English. First, because they don't speak English. I mean, from the very beginning, Islamic Republic was against foreign languages. So those of us who speak English, it's like we are very rare, or we come from families that they wanted us to learn English. So you don't see anything. Like what you see in the news about Iran is just a tip of the iceberg, like really. And the Persian media contents doesn't get translated. Again, it is happening at the time that the world is dealing with crisis. And all the countries are busy with their own affairs and trying to rescue themselves and their economy. So who wants to spend time on Iran, especially dealing with a dangerous regime? But one thing that I can assure you of is that nobody is scared of this regime anymore. Nobody, even those.
I hope so.
Yes, it is absolute. So one thing to make sure about is that once we write to the universities and to these organizations, make sure that this is a real revolution. This is not just a small movement.
Revolution, I am not sure for this term, you see, revolution.
Okay, Christian, could you give me a second? Nasim, are you done? And I'll move on to give the floor to Christian. So Christian, now you have the floor, please, your 5 minutes.
Well, I would like to speak about Gilan, about a region in Iran, you see, northern Iran, where I conducted field work as an anthropologist. And there was two contradictory visions which were opposed about women in Gilan. On the one hand, many factors speak in favor of a higher status for women than that which prevails in other regions of Iran. On the other hand, there is an evidence of overexploitation of agricultural female labor. Are these two contradictory approaches incompatible? In support of the first hypothesis, it will be argued that the rate of female education is higher than in the other rural provinces of Iran. In 2002, 20.6% of girls had their diploma, the equivalent of the general certificate of secondary education. The According to the 2015 census, 46% of women are part of the active population. The age difference between the married couple is small, 2 area for this originality of the status of women in Gilan. The singularity of this status as the ransom of a tenacious reputation for frivolity that dates back beyond the 20th century and fuels countless jokes that are widespread in Iranian society. Let us look to the peasant world. Certain features attest to the special status of women. The structure of inhabited space, for example. While in central Iran, peasant houses are hidden behind blind walls, rural dwellings in Gilan traditionally offer their facade. This predominance of the open over the closed is a central value of the ways of life in Gilan. The sexual division of tasks in the agricultural domain also takes on a certain originality in Gilan. For threshing rice, men use the flail in the central plain, but this task can also be done by women. In the pastoral sectors of the region, milking gives rise to an unusual distribution of tasks in pastoral societies in Iran, and once again underlines the originality of the Caspian world. Men milk goats and sheep, an activity generally reserved for women. In short, a whole series of examples illustrate the singular status of women in Gilan and the parity of daily wages for men and women in the agricultural sector, which gives the impression of an egalitarian society. This trend was reinforced, perhaps generated by industrial work from the end of the 19th century. 100 Western establishments for the treatment of cocoons and then for spinning were then set up, employing mostly women. So these are examples and reasons for the originality of the status of women in Gilan. But if we turn to the main agricultural activity, rice cultivation, the overexploitation of female labor is evident. Before mechanization, the number of working days per hectare was estimated at 105 for men and 160 for women. The introduction of tiller accentuates this contrast: 25% male work, 47% female work, 28% mixed work, but the contrast is mainly based on the task performed. Operations which require the use of hand-swung chopping tools, bill hooks, axes, and spades, or those which require operating complex machinery, plows and arrows drawn by animals and threshing machines, are left to the men. Tasks that generally do not require tools, but for which the laborer has to stoop or bend down, transplanting, weeding, are reserved for women. This work is particularly painful, with a bent back and under a scorching sun. Mechanization has mainly benefited men, much less women. How to account for this gap between indices of female status advantages and the signs of overexploitation? This is, it seems to me, a social difference. Urban women and rich peasant women escape the most arduous tasks in rice cultivations. As soon as the social situation of peasant of a peasant woman improved, she avoids transplanting and weeding, delegating this particularly painful task to the poorest. The contrast, which accounts for the two images of the feminine condition in Gilan, is therefore social. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Christian, for this ethnographical notes of the past.
Yeah,
and I think your intervention is interesting in the sense that it sort of gives no, I wouldn't say a contrast, but an idea of peasant, traditional peasant life that kind of, to us listening to you all and not knowing Iran and not knowing the ethnography of Iran, it sounds like something totally alien from what we've been seeing. And for instance, what Michel Bouchard posted in the chat, if you click in there, you'll see the news about the revolution and the upheavals in the street. And now that all of you have had the chance to speak twice, and we'll now move on to debate. Of course, as we saw already, there's a lot of issues to debate here and different views of several things. But the fact is that I think that all the upheavals that we've had in the Middle East and Northern Africa in the past 20 years, this Iranian revolution, let's call it this way, has certainly the female tone, right? Women did come forward. It's not that they didn't come forward in other situations, but this Iranian revolution definitely has a female touch to it. So it's interesting to listen to Nadia and Nasim, and of course also Hana, because it's also important to have someone from a different background and from a different context reading what's happening in Iran. But it's interesting to listen to that in contrast with a bit of the more traditional ethnography that Christian presents us with. And it's not, I think this ethnographical detail is also interesting, but what has happened in Iran to change this and is actually the difference between rural and urban so different. And I think here nowadays, and here in this webinar, I think we have different views, right? Nasim, correct me if I'm wrong, but seems to defend that actually this is a sort of a nationwide revolution, and that even women in peasant areas have engaged in this. And also the issue that Nadia and Christian started debating in that we can pursue here of the role of education, of education for women. How did it work? In the one sense, yes, they did go to the university, but as Nadia said, curricula were changed so that women and that students in general would not have access to many things that would offend the Islamic nation, right? So these are, I think, two topics that we can start the debate with, and are very interesting, but I'm sure more will come. So who wants to have the floor first? We can also open up to people who are not in the room, in the Zoom room, but are with us through chat or are in the Zoom. But so raise your hands, please, and let's take turns so that not everyone speaks at the same time, because that's a mess when we are in Zoom. You have to please turn off your microphones when you're not talking so that so it works well. So Subhadra, I think you were the first one, and then I'll move on to Nasim. Subhadra, please.
Yeah, I will take it up from where a very important point that Nasim had raised and which we kind of lost in the thread about the academic focus on Orientalism and the anti-Western nationalism, even the academic nationalism that it triggered off. Now, as feminists, and this is a general debate in feminism and an issue that has come up considerably, and it is coming up in India, it is been also, and that is a situation, is that this cultural nationalism, which is now being propagated, that we are Indian, we are Iranian or whatever, and we are not Western, we want to, the anti-colonial. But many times, and this is again something which has been talked about in the feminist forums, is that this nationalism tends to foster conservative values which are often patriarchal. And so that, now in India, we see the revival of Brahmanical patriarchy, casteism, gender bias, although, and this is one point. And the second point is that there is always this gap between overt legality, which gives a defense to many states that, okay, we have all the laws in place. And again, I'm speaking from from where I come from. All the laws are in place. If we give inheritance to, I'll give one very strong example. In India, girls and boys inherit equally. There is equal inheritance for all children. But in reality, girls almost 100% do not claim their inheritance because of cultural reasons. Because cultural, this identity is very strong. No, Indian girls don't do that. Indian sisters don't go against their brothers. They give their inheritance willingly to their brothers. So these are some of very interesting issues which kind of, as Rukhsana said, the day-to-day things, which are not overt, but which are covert, and but which I think somewhere this anger or this dissatisfaction accumulates, and then it bursts out in certain symbolic gestures, which Christiana was talking about. I mean, cutting of hair is a symbol behind which may be many multiple factors which are embedded in day-to-day things. And this cultural nationalism, these post-colonial revivalisms of national identity is also, kind of pressed on certain sensitive areas, which are detrimental to ethnic minorities, to socially disadvantaged people like the lower castes in India, to women, like that. I think these are issues which merge with what we are talking about.
Thank you so much, Badra. So I'll give the floor now to Nasim. We also have a question on the chat by Carmen. I'll read it, by Carmen Real, our colleague from Brazil. I'll read it, so perhaps you guys can incorporate it now in the debate. She's saying, I would like to hear the panelists about the political alliances of Iran, Russia, and how it resonates on the internal gender and general politics of the regime. We cannot assume that all the world or that everyone in the world is against the regime, right? So I thought I would incorporate this reflection on what you are going to say now. So Nasim, please.
First of all, I see Virginia Dominguez wrote a comment on the chat box. Said that the Iran International Newsroom is headquartered in London and has bureaus in Istanbul, Paris, Washington, D.C. It is also clearly and openly against the Iranian government. I think it's a very good thing you mentioned here, because Iran International itself it's a very good source, I think, for the Western media, just to get the news from them and translate it into English or other languages. It's very important. If they just only translate Iran International news on Iran, then they'll see the reality of what's going on in Iran. Only part of it, but it's very important to have this kind of newsrooms as sources for academia as well, especially when we deal with a country like Iran that doesn't give access to data and doesn't let the researchers go and do the research directly there. So the question you asked, I think Nadia would have a better answer to that. Maybe if you want to intervene and talk about it a little bit.
I think before, to be honest, that's not my area. I can say what I think about it, but I think before we go into this, I think I sort of see in terms of the statistics that we get outside of Iran, I think the methodology that these statistics have adopted, I would like to know what methodology they had adopted. I would like to know where, it says, I was just reading it while how did they distribute this methodology? I think these are really important questions. I personally, from what I have seen, and I have done qualitative research in Iran, speaking to student universities, female student universities and male student universities in Iran. But this was before the uprising a few years ago. I would like to think that 90% of the population are against the government, but I think I will probably, I doubt. I don't know. I'm conflicted with that statistics, because I think what's happening, Iran in general, I think is a traditional country. You know, a lot. I agree that the population is very young. I agree that a lot of the young generation are against the government, and we have seen it in the streets. We have seen it in the last 5 months. But I think Iranian government, unfortunately, what they have done is they have promoted a form of a gender ideology, and they have justified it using religion. So in a way, I'm not discrediting the Iranian people in Iran who are living there, but I think some people don't agree with the government ideology. Some people, I think perhaps a small minority, believe that if they oppose it, they have committed a sin, because the portrayal of Islam in Iran is the true Islam. And therefore, if they oppose it, they have committed a sin. I think we can't ignore that part of the population in Iran, in a way. And Nasim, if you want to come in, please do.
Yeah, thank you. I think you talked to the university students before the uprisings, and all right. But if you just, I have personal conversations with the students in Iran nowadays, and we see that even not just the university students, but also like elementary school, high school students, they don't want this regime. Just search like high school students resistance against Iranian regime, especially in the past few months. It's devastating situation for them, really. And when I say 90%, I don't doubt it, you know, as a sociologist, as an anthropologist, and also feminist scholars. I'm saying that my guess is that it is really 99%. And now we see that even the reformists who were always trying to rescue the regime, and whenever Iran and the righties, conservatives were in danger, these were the people who come rescue them. But right now, there is no reformist party even. They all turned into opposition. You know what happened? So this is the good thing about this revolution right now. And it is definitely women-led revolution, feminist revolution, because whatever we are seeing as like this phenomena as a revolution has been built by women's movement, and of course intersections with other movements like LGBTQ, queer movements, and also other movements that were led by men, but mostly for and by Iranian women, both in Iran and in diaspora. And I agree with Nadia, it's a gender apartheid. It's an apartheid that is based and is shaped by the political Islam, that Islamic Republic has been introduced and built on it through their patriarchal and traditional interpretations of Islam, which is, they think it's real Islam, but it's not real Islam for sure. And actually they have damaged and like devastated the image of Iran, Islam in Iran. Now you see that a lot of youth, like even those with the Islamic background, Muslim background, they don't consider themselves as Muslims anymore, just because of the trauma that they experienced by the Muslim, fundamentalist Muslim leaders. So I think it's much more than 90% right now. People don't want, even I talk to the people who come from families who were like maybe from Basij militia or Revolutionary Guards, and men and women both, say that we are done with this regime. We want new lives. And also during COVID, they went through lots of psychological changes and cultural changes. So it's not this Iran of even 1 year ago anymore.
Okay, we have two of the speakers I want to intervene again, Christian and Nadia. I think Christian raised his hand before. So Christian, please. You're muted. You need to unmute yourself. Le son, il faut mettre le son. Voilà.
Excuse me. As a citizen, I quite agree with you, Nasim. But as a scientist, I am not sure that I agree with you. You see, when I see the people, the crowd, for the burial, when Mr. Soleimani was buried, it was impressive to see the crowd in the streets, you see. And so I am not sure that there are 90%, because there are 1 million Basiji in Iran, and there are 100,000 guardians of revolutions, you see, and their economic part is very important in Iran too. And so I am not sure that 90% people are against the regime. And I agree with what you said, Nadia, in your previous intervention, you see, when you said, well, Islam is very important, and it's not a problem only of Islam, this separation of roles between genders, because you have that in Mediterranean societies, in Christian Mediterranean societies. Of course, it's not so acute as in Islamic countries, but it's a general feature of Mediterranean countries and Middle Eastern countries, you see.
Yeah.
With different...
Can I please now give the word to Nadia, because she just wrote she has to leave in 5 minutes, so I'd like her to answer Christian. And please, Nadia.
I think what I wanted to say, I think it's sort of I'm sitting on a fence a little bit here, but I would say when the revolution started, you know, they had a sort of a circle that some people fell outside of that circle. And as the revolution proceeded, in the last 44 years, that circle has become smaller and smaller, and more women have been thrown out of that main circle, because at the beginning, you know, they were very much for Muslim feminists, you know, and now we have seen how many Muslim feminists have been actually imprisoned in Iran because they don't agree with the Islam that the government is, the state, not the government, the state is actually promoting. So I just give you one example. I was talking to this young woman who became number 3 in the national university examination, entrance examination, which is, you know, she was one of the high IQ people. I said, what is your view about the age of criminal responsibility in Iran? And I said, well, for women, for women is 9, for men is 15. She said, oh, that's not acceptable. I don't think that's, you know, she went and started to bring reasons into why this is not acceptable. And then I said, well, this is the criminal sort of the codes of Iran, and it's based on the government's perspective, is based on Sharia. And then she started thinking aloud. Thinking, is it based on Sharia? And I said, well, that is what the government is telling us. You know, I don't know. Is that what? He said, well, maybe there is a good reason behind it. And then she was conflicted. She said, oh, maybe not. I don't know. I think these are so complex, because when the government is producing laws and policies that they say is based on their kind of Islam, some people buy that discourse. I'm not saying the majority. I think there is a minority that buy, and those are the people who come to Qasem Soleimani's sort of a demonstration when they ask them. I'm not this, please do not, I don't want to offend or discredit the young people in Iran. I think a large number of Iranians are against the government, but I don't know whether it's 90%. And I don't think whether it's the majority or not. But I think this is, I would like to finish with this saying that I think this is an unprecedented a feminist movement in Iran. I think it's amazing. I think it has definitely shaken the Iranian government to the core. And it's enjoyable to see this. It's enjoyable to see that the older generation are actually joining the movement. I think the Generation Z have shown their agency, their autonomy, and I think it brings a sort of consciousness, not only national consciousness, but global consciousness.
Yes,
about,
I agree with that.
About social justice. And it shows how liberty crime is committed and perpetuated by the Iranian state against its own people and especially women. So I'm sorry that if I talked too much.
You didn't talk too much, Nadia. Thank you so much for your participation. Sorry you have to leave, but we won't be here a lot longer. It's been 1.5 hours, so let's say we'll have 10 more minutes to wrap up. But normally these webinars don't take longer than 1.5 hours or so, because otherwise, everyone has commitments and then it's too long. But thank you very, very much, Nadia, for your participation. Of course, we could be here discussing this debate, discussing these issues, but so I don't know, Nasim, I think you had something more to say, no?
Yes, I want to just answer. I have an answer to Christian about Qasem Soleimani. Again, Qasem Soleimani was killed before COVID. And I insist that Iranians changed, really like dramatic change. I cannot believe it. Some of my even family members dramatically changed. It's not the Iran that we knew 5 years ago or 3 years ago even. So it's very important to take into consideration once we talk about Iran today, so
sorry for interrupting, Nasim, but why do you think that the pandemic had such an important role in this change?
Well, because pandemic brought a lot of psychological changes with itself, and also isolation made Iranians think about their past. This is something that really changed their mindset, and also Instagram, internet, because you know that all these social media networks were filtered by the Islamic government. But then during the COVID and with having access to especially Instagram and Telegram rooms, Iranians were confronted with a totally different world. And that changed their mindset. Even in rural areas, even in a small town, very traditional patriarchal places, people are protesting. So it's not something common. It doesn't happen. It happened in 1979 and right now today. And so Qasem Soleimani is not the same Qasem Soleimani for Iranians anymore, because people's mindset about the entire regime changed. And of course, Qasem Soleimani was a commander-in-chief and had lots of fans among Basiris or in Sepah, but he's out of discourse right now. Even like nobody wants, and
but
so many people.
See, the population of France changed between 1942 and 1945. There were Pétainistes and after Gaullists, you see, after the...
It's like a rebirth. It's like a rebirth, really. Like people are not themselves anymore. They changed, their wisdom changed, their education changed, their entire imagination and knowledge of the world changed. And we can see that. Look, even older women in hijab come and protest.
No, I don't discuss that, but you see, you can reverse to a previous previous state of affairs, you see.
Yes,
And yes, it's possible.
it
I
is.
don't hope that, but it's possible.
But believe me, Christian, the entire world has changed. It's not only Iran. Here in the US, in Europe, people have
Yes, but
dramatically
this
changed.
history is not from one point to one point, but it is like that history, you see.
Yeah, and it's an
It is
end to
not
the
it is
generational
not
cycle.
progress.
Well,
Yes.
I think we have both views, a very optimistic view from Nasim,
Yeah.
and another view from Christian. But
Yes.
And I
actually,
know
yeah, it
even,
is true.
sorry, Clara, for interrupting you. I'm telling you, in the past 44 years, nobody dared to organize conferences on Iran. But what I'm saying, during COVID, we had this academic movement that led, like supported the civil movement. It happened in Vienna, very important. And then another was organized by Claudia Yaqubi at North Carolina University, and then Nayera Tauhid, and all these people are the prominent and like in the forefront of democratic struggles. And then by University of British Columbia, Mustafa Abedini Far. It was a series of events that led to this revolution, and it's exceptional. It changed the world's understanding of Iran and what's going on there.
Before the revolution, you need a leader and an organization.
Yeah, and the problem was that we didn't have leaders, but now we see that leaders are being born and emerged from these movements, and they're forming their own coalition. So it is in a good phase right now. But I think the importance of having such webinars is that we say that, okay, it's a revolution right now. How can we help?
Yes.
How can we help? How can we on the side of Iranian people this time, not the government?
Yeah, if I may intervene at this point of time, that was where I started off my discussion for today. Is my point was, we have been discussing the movement, but what about the next step? And I feel that is where we should be leading the debate towards. That is what we need to understand as academics in academia. How can we take this forward?
Yes, and also, Christian, there's another thing I wanted to tell you, I forgot, is that yes, patriarchy exists everywhere in the world, but you cannot imagine, compare situation of, for example, post-communist societies and women in post-communist societies, or even Western European to Iranians or Afghans.
Yeah, that's right.
They don't have even their basic fundamental rights there, which nobody deserves. Right. Nobody deserves. They experience violence on a daily basis.
Yes,
it doesn't matter how civilized you are, how you have a beautiful culture. Once you go to the street, you're being exposed to violence to an extent that people lost their memory, their cognition. Now they're remembering themselves, and that's a revolution. What is a revolution? It happens in brains.
No, certainly. I think what Christian was mentioning is that for a revolution to be successful, you need you need a very organized, and you need a leader. So, well, let's hope it happens in Iran. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yes, let's hope.
Okay, so this we're like reaching almost 1 hour 40 minutes of webinar, which is normally the tops. We normally don't last longer than 1 hour 45 minutes because it's too long. But I don't know if anyone has anything more to add. I think that Nasim put definitely the accent, well, the note on the role of academia, and that's one of the reasons why we're all here. We're all academics, and we're all, I'm sure everyone is willing to do their best to help this Iranian revolution, upheaval, movement, whatever we want to call it. But I think academia is very important. But for me, academia really has to go into the streets. I mean, it has to reach the public and not stay within academia, although academia is very important, of course, anywhere in the world, because academia often leads the way to contesting especially totalitarian regimes, but not only. So I think, especially in Iran, from what I've been listening to, hearing you all talk, the role of academia, of academics in Iran, many of them, as you said, Nasim and Nadia, in the diaspora, have played a very important role, right?
Yeah, and they are the only ones having access to academic platforms. But thanks to IUAS, thanks to you, and for providing such platform, I hope we will increase it. And as you say, bring these academic theories into practice, into the streets, and stop demonizing and criminalizing those academics who get involved in social movements or political movements, because they need people like us there.
Definitely. And unfortunately, we are in a world, as you all know, that is not heading the good way. I mean, what's going on between Russia and Ukraine is not exactly the best example for things to go in the good direction, but let's hope things get better. Okay, so this, I would like to ask if anyone either in the chat room or anyone present would want to say anything else, or if we should end this webinar here. And as you know, this has been streamed live through the WCA webpage and at Facebook. It will also be on the WAU-WCA and IOAS website, the recorded version. And if any of you then has further questions or debates they want to pursue, of course, you're more than welcome to contact everyone in both these organizations. And I would like to thank you all, the participants and everyone who's been listening. I'd like to thank you very much for being here, for giving us some of your precious time, and hope to see you again in many future WOW, WCA and IOAS webinars. They take place once every 2 months, and the next one is scheduled for March 23rd, and it will be on editorial politics, basically the clash between the West, Northern editorial politics, and the rest of us that don't speak English as a native language, and what happens with the editorial politics of people from non-hegemonic English-speaking countries. So I think that will also be a very interesting webinar, and it will take place on March 23rd. Thank you very much to everyone. Have a good night or a good morning or a good afternoon, wherever you are, and hope to see you soon again in the webinar or wherever. Thank you very much.